So what's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, my name is Jordan Lee, also known as Jordan the Dragon Lee on YouTube. My channel is mainly about breaking down the cultural context of Dragon Ball, its connections to Journey to the West, and basically just expressing my appreciation for Dragon Ball as a series, but not just Dragon Ball as a series, but Akira Toriyama as a whole. And unfortunately, Akira Toriyama passed away on March 1st, and it's just been devastating news for the world. You see it everywhere. People all across the world are mourning Akira Toriyama. So I just wanted to make this video expressing my appreciation for the man and why I consider him one of my heroes. So when I was younger, I watched Dragon Ball. I loved it. I remember watching the full Dragon Ball series on Toonami while the reruns were running on Toonami of Dragon Ball Z at the time. So the story wasn't progressing really fast on the Dragon Ball Z end, but it was on the Dragon Ball end. So I remember watching Dragon Ball on Toonami, the original series, and loving it. And I love Dragon Ball Z too, but I really loved the original Dragon Ball as a kid. And then I grew up. Dragon Ball sort of took a back seat in my life for a really long time. And then by the time I started watching Dragon Ball again, I had read a lot of literature and learned a lot of things about Japanese and Chinese culture that I wasn't aware of before, and Egyptian culture, which is part of the reason I'm such a huge fan of Dragon Ball Super, because funny enough, when I came back, when Battle of Gods came out, I had just been researching the Egyptian gods and Egyptian mythology and Journey to the West. I completed Journey to the West, and I became a super huge fanboy. So when Battle of Gods came out, it was like it was catered to me. Like, it felt that way. It felt like it was made for me. I know it wasn't, but that's what it felt like. Because at the time, it was completely centered around the things that I've been studying about martial arts, mythology, philosophy, and things of that nature. And so Battle of Gods had a huge impact on me as a Dragon Ball fan. In fact, it birthed my own manga. I made a love letter to Dragon Ball, essentially. Dragon Ball Infinity, which is just like a fan manga that I created. It's essentially my love letter to Akira Toriyama and to Dragon Ball. And it has a very similar premise to Dragon Ball in that the main character is based on a god in Egyptian culture named Babi, who is essentially the Egyptian equivalent of Sun Wukong. So, Battle of Gods, whenever Akira Toriyama started playing on Egyptian and Chinese culture and blending the two, that's what birthed this character, because I started doing research and I realized that this character had a lot in common with Sun Wukong, despite the fact he was from an entirely different mythology. I found out that he was very, very similar to Sun Wukong, so I had the idea. I was like, well, I'll do a manga just like Dragon Ball, but it'll be my thing. It'll be, my version of a concept similar to Goku. And this character in Egyptian mythology is a metaphorical representation of the ego, just like Sun Wukong. There are tons of things that I found out during the course of my research that Egyptian mythology and Chinese myth, particularly Journey to the West, have in common. Spiritual and philosophical ideas, very, very similar to each other. Egyptian mythology and Chinese mythology have a lot in common in terms of their stories and what they represent and the message. So the more I researched, the more I became fascinated with the topic, and that's sort of what fed in to the creation of Dragon Ball Infinity, was exploring that topic. And I really felt that because I was doing so similar to Akira Toriyama, and because I was putting all this effort into this manga, with Copy Workshop, the artists who helped me do it, because I couldn't do it all by myself. There's no way. I started to realize and just gain a deep appreciation for who Akira Toriyama was and all the effort and work that he put into his work. Because a lot of people don't realize this, but Dragon Ball plays on subtext, okay? Goku has always been a representation of our instincts. He's good by nature, so he does good out of instinct. That's what he's always been a representation of, and that's because that's something discussed in martial arts. And Vegeta has always been a representation of the ego, and a bunch of other villains throughout Dragon Ball. And so Dragon Ball plays on subtext in a very similar way to Journey to the West. All the characters in Journey to the West represent different aspects of a person and of our psychology, and Dragon Ball is very, very similar. Goku and Vegeta represent two dualistic aspects of our nature as human beings. So Toriyama was way more intelligent, way more intuitive, and way more creative than people give him credit for. Despite the fact that Dragon Ball is a martial arts combat-based manga and anime, the subtext behind it has very deep implications. And once I learned that Akira Toriyama played on subtext in this way, it inspired me to do the same thing. And I delved into this task of essentially following in his footsteps and writing a story in a very similar manner to him and trying to recreate his techniques and his methods. And the more I learned about Akira Toriyama's writing style, and the more I learned about who he was as a person, I really started to get an understanding for just what an amazing person he actually was. I remember watching this interview where he was being interviewed on this television show, and it's so strange because we all want success, we all want to succeed, and Akira Toriyama, of course, wanted success. Anybody would. But once he got it, it became a nightmare. And that became very, very clear because the media hounded him at his wedding. He was so just... It seems like something out of a storybook or out of a legend. It doesn't really necessarily seem real how everything played out. Because he found this massive success, and then he ended up having to put up a sign at his house saying, "Leave me alone." And he got married, became rich, and gained the respect of the world all at the same time. He did all of that at once. And that's an amazing achievement. And he was seeing all of that happen in real time in this interview. He was starting to understand. You could see the look on his face. He was starting to understand exactly what was going on, and it was actually kind of scaring him. And in that way, he reminds me of just your average person, just like you or me or anyone else. He's very clearly socially awkward in a lot of ways. And I can be too, which is why I'm rarely on camera. But when I started reading his interviews and really just learning his writing style and how he goes about doing things, because he's an improvisational storyteller, but he has a blueprint for that method, right? So because Dragon Ball was an allegory for martial arts, he could continuously play on the same themes over and over and over again. And that's essentially what he did. Like, Dragon Ball is just a repeated message of the ideas and the effect that Buddhism and Taoism moral philosophies had on martial arts. So Goku and the show itself is an allegorical representation of the morals that went into practicing martial arts. Goku himself is a representation of those morals and the ideas of martial arts itself. He is martial arts. And it's just so creative and well done because Sun Wukong, the character that he was based on, is an allegorical representation of the one thing that gives us trouble mastering martial arts, and that's the monkey mind, the ego. So you're seeing a character who's based on an allegorical representation of a part of our psyche, the same part of our psyche that gives us issues as martial artists and as people sometimes, our survival instincts, our ego. And the idea is that you can take that part of your psyche and you can make it your best friend through martial arts and through Buddhist and Taoist practices and exercises. And Goku is a representation of that. That's why he's such a good person, because he is a literal representation of that idea. And the way that Akira Toriyama geniusly implemented that idea is underrated. People just kind of see Dragon Ball as this action kung fu manga and anime when it's just like any other old kung fu film. They all played on this philosophical battle between two conflicting ideas. And that's essentially what Dragon Ball is. It is a kung fu themed story that implements the same ideas. It doesn't rub it in your face or preach about it. It plays on it through subtext. And that's not all Dragon Ball does. That's just an example, but like that's the main thing that makes Dragon Ball genius. And people have said that Goku and Akira Toriyama are very similar in a lot of ways. And one of my favorite pictures of Akira Toriyama is this one, where in the background it says, "Be lighthearted." And to me, that really sums up why I have so much respect for Akira Toriyama and why I looked up to him so much, not just as a creative person, but his personality was so just real and gratifying. He was so humble. He was so, like, seeing him and reading his interviews, I could totally see myself being in that position where I find massive success and that I don't know how to deal with it, and I'm just completely taken back by it. You know what I mean? Like, I relate to that so much. I think because he was such a lighthearted person that he comes off sort of like an underdog effect, where he's just universally respected by anyone and everyone because he has such a good heart and a good nature. People see that in him. They see his purity. As a matter of fact, in that interview that I was speaking of earlier, the interviewer keeps talking about how pure he is. And he keeps giving her this look like, what are you talking about? And it's funny because, like, I can totally see what she's talking about. He's a goofball. Like, he talks about in the interview about how he, like, would draw things over and over that he wanted until he would manifest it. And that is hilarious to me. And, the more you learn about him as a person, the more you start to see he's shy, he's kind of awkward. He just wants to live with his family in peace and be creative and enjoy his life. And there's just something really, really respectable about that. And outside of just how ridiculously creative he was just an amazing person in general. And so it goes without saying, there is a huge amount of people right now in this world who are communicating the same message that I am, that are talking about what an influential, amazing a person Akira Toriyama was. You see it all across social media, all across YouTube. So many thank you and love letters to Akira Toriyama have been created over the past 48 hours. So the impact that he had on this world sort of speaks for itself. And who he was as a person is a huge reason as to why he had that impact on the world. It's very, very similar to the impact that Goku himself has on the world. He's so pure that he purifies the world around him, and he makes it a better place. You know, Dragon Ball has created tons of friendships in my personal life. Impact that Akira Toriyama had on this world, and I said this yesterday, it just simply can't be overstated. The impact that he had on this world is absolutely insane. and it sort of speaks for itself. But Akira Toriyama is one of my heroes, not just because of his writing style or how creative he was or how he went about doing things in media. That's part of it. But his personal philosophy of trying to be as lighthearted as possible speaks to me in a lot of ways. Because I try to be as forgiving and humble and reserved and just as respectful to the people around me as possible. And the thing is you can see how Akira Toriyama feels about things through his work. You can see that this idea of having empathy and consideration for all life was something that he held dear just by consuming his work. When Gohan is talking about how, he doesn't want to hurt Cell because he's that much of not just a pacifist, but he just sees the value in all living things, in all people. And I relate to that in a lot of ways. I think that's one of the things that stuck out to me the most about Dragon Ball is the moral principles that it puts forward. They've always meant a lot to me. And it's very, very clear what sort of moral philosophy Akira Toriyama himself also had. It's very, very clear how he felt about things. Because he talked about it. He showed it, and he's known for that. He's known for communicating things that he feels and believes and fanboys over through his stories. He's known for that. So, I may have never met Akira Toriyama, but I did get a sense of the type of person he was while he was alive through various interviews and through the series itself. The same things that he talks about and highlights in Dragon Ball in terms of like moral philosophy and just ideas in general. I thought about a lot of those things myself, and I relate to a lot of those things myself. But that is pretty much, amongst a bunch of other things, I could go on for hours about how I feel about Toriyama and how cool he is. And he never thought he was that cool, but he was really cool. But that's pretty much why I feel the way I do about the man. He communicated an idea through his work that I think is amazing and very ironic, because the underlying narrative of Dragon Ball, it's very similar to the underlying narrative of Journey to the West. If you put your heart and your mind to something and you do it with a pure heart and pure intentions, you can achieve anything. And that's what Akira Toriyama did. He achieved exactly what he wanted. And he did it with a pure heart and with pure intentions. He never had the intent of making anybody's life worse. He never had the intent of doing anything horrible. He just wanted to be creative, live his life, enjoy his time with his family, and do his thing, which who wouldn't want to do that? But I just think that when you take a step back and you look at it all, the way everything played out is like a legend. It's like a story. It's almost unbelievable. And I'm just really grateful to have been a part of it. I'm really grateful to have experienced it and to have seen it. And it's just, I don't know, it's a spectacle to behold. Akira Toriyama was such an amazing person. He was a spectacle. He was a legend. He's one of my personal heroes. And I'm sure he's going to be extremely missed. And I just wanted to express my condolences and express just how much he meant to me and why he's one of my heroes and why I looked up to him and why I appreciated him so much. I talk about it on my channel all the time. You can go back and look at my other videos. My whole channel is dedicated to just how amazing he was at doing what he did. I had a major appreciation for the man, and I looked up to him a lot. And everybody's got to go at some point. It's just unfortunate that we lost such an amazing person, such a kind soul. The impact this has had on me as a person. I rewatched that interview today. It had a significant impact on me. It really helped me through the process of accepting what was going on, because Akira Toriyama, despite everything that he had to deal with once he found success, was very, very clearly a happy man. He got to marry the woman he loved. He became one of the richest people in Japan. He got to just sit around and be creative and do exactly what he wanted all the time. He dedicated himself to his work. He was way more disciplined than people give him credit for. And I just have a lot of respect for him. And I just felt it was appropriate, as somebody who covers Akira Toriyama's work on my channel. I just wanted to express this because with his passing, I think that he deserves to be honored. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.